Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, we're going to continue looking at the quote unquote giants or large hominids, as I like to call them, state by state, and we're going to do the Carolinas today. And it's not many in the Carolinas. In fact, there isn't any in South Carolina, but he does give some interesting facts about South Carolina that I want to go over anyway. But I don't know. Every time I go through the giant state by state, every state we go to, I think of all the songs and stuff that are associated with states and whatnot. And made me think of Carolina on My Mind by James Taylor. I don't know if you like James Taylor, but I do. It's from my time listening when I was a little kid. In my mind, I'm gone to Carolina. Can't you see the sunshine? Can't you just feel the moonshine? Maybe just like a friend of mine, taking me from behind. Yes, I'm gone to Carolina in my mind. Ain't that a grand song? That's a great song. Well, anyway, guys, we're going to go through the Giants here. And, of course, what's so interesting to me is the details in some of these accounts. Some very old accounts, newer accounts, accounts during the time of Alice Herdlischka from the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian. We don't hear a lot about that stuff, but that's because the guy buried it, and he was a punk, and he's probably responsible for a lot of this guy right here, Alice Herdlischka, was a punk. And because of him, a lot of these skeletal remains were destroyed. No doubt. He was a tyrant. He was just a horrible guy, and he set back this research by, who knows how many years. And some of the reasons why we have so much prejudice on it is because of him. And other people too. I mean, there's obviously a psyop going on. Okay, so Catawba County, 8-foot mammoth human. Okay, so guys, this is where they're gonna be like, see, mammoth. It's a map. No, in this case, they're using it as an adjective. You see what I'm saying? So this to describe the size of the thing. Not that it's a mammoth, it's mammoth size, okay? It's descriptive phraseology. The late freshet in Catawba River, says the Hickory Press, unearthed a mammoth human skeleton measuring 8 feet, which is doubtless an antediluvian fossil. The press hopes the skeleton will be sent to the Charlotte Centennial and thence to Philadelphia, where perhaps the bones may be identified by some of the dead man's relations. Okay, so, I did think, because Philadelphia is a place where some of this research is being done back then. And again, another 8-footer, and that's an awful big guy. Don't give any more details, but again, sometimes there isn't a lot of details. Bertie County, 7 to 9-foot giants. Considerable excitement prevailed at Raleigh, North Carolina on the 25th over the reported discovery in Bertie County near the coast in that state of the remains of a number of gigantic men in a mound. The skeletons were discovered in a sitting position, and their heights ranged from 7 to 9 feet. The state geologist had gone to investigate. Okay, so again, and if you've been following along with my videos, I've been going through these accounts from state to state, and not only from here, in different places in the world as well. I went over the one from Ancient Origins, where in the Georgian mountains there, where these reported giants were, they dug up some rather large bones that suspiciously got lost, never to be found again in modern times. So, I mean, they're still getting lost for some reason. And they, again, the reports of the skeletons there were sitting at a table, facing each other. And again, these burials we've heard of before in other states, where you have some meaning, particular meaning to this, which is, they just, nobody, I guess, is putting it together. Or they should be. I don't know where you're going to find the research or whatever, but apparently this is the type of burials that were found over and over again, along with other ones that maybe different time periods, different. The attributions are just, of course, all over the map of the time periods, because they just don't know. So, where this was from doesn't say there. Okay, so it's just the moderator saying about how rare it is to find 7 foot tall. There's only 20 players in the NBA that are like 7 foot or so, and it's like the most people in the world. So great size and with the most remarkable skulls. North Carolina rejoices in the unexpected discovery in an ancient mound of 56 skeletons, some of them of great size, with most remarkable skulls, quote unquote. So, when you hear 56 skeletons in mounds, okay, so there was hundreds of thousands of mounds, okay, so you're just trying to figure out the populations of these peoples and what time periods you could find. Were they short-lived, or because you would expect to find like millions of mounds of people if you had a large population, or were these, all part of, after most of them were wiped off the face of the earth by some cataclysm in the past, this is who was left, and often found all buried in one mound, 65 people. Okay, so we're talking about what kind of populations built all these things and everything else. It's confounding, but in any case, again, with remarkable skulls. So again, some sort of different kind of humanoid. This is interesting. Hitherto, the ancient mounds supposed to have been erected by a prehistoric race have yielded nothing more remarkable than stone hatchets, flint arrowheads, and some dishes of a quality that would have disgraced our American pottery infant, quote unquote, in its most infantile days. Skulls, however, when remarkable, are of general interest. A collection of human skulls from the earliest times to the present day, could it be had, would enable scientists to write an accurate history of human development, and probably to discover what was the missing link, quote unquote. In what respect the North Carolina skulls are remarkable, the dispatches do not say, but if their owners had attained only to that degree of development which the mound builders are believed to have reached, the skulls must be of most remarkable size. Okay, so New Ulm Weekly Review, May 23rd, 1883. So just again, I don't know what the follow up was on it, but this time, you had H.W. Holmes, I believe, in the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian. He was another creep who buried all of this stuff, and just I'm sure most of these things were destroyed or whatever, went the way of the dumpster. Halifax County, gigantic proportions. Okay, so it's just talking about this county up there in North Carolina. And Richmond capitalists are interested in a project for the development of the water power of Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. The skeleton of a human being of gigantic proportions, supposed to be that of a prehistoric man, was unearthed near Bristol last week. Lexington Gazette, May 23rd, 1906. Okay, so that's all the accounts there in North Carolina, but there were a few. And again, talking about mounds, again, some of the mounds that, some of them are left, some of them aren't. They've been either bulldozed or, excavated, quote unquote, and I guess destroyed. But that was North Carolina. South Carolina didn't seem to have any, but he referred again to that dime store museum or whatever it was. I don't know what that had to do with North Carolina there, but in any case, this was the second one in there for South Carolina. Duhair's Giant Tribes. And this is interesting to me on a couple of different fronts here, but it's interesting what they say here. The inhabitants of Duhair were described as being Europeans who seemed to possess few metal tools. They had red to brown hair, tan skin, and gray eyes. The men wore full beards and were much taller than the Spanish. So, to me, this says a couple of things. First of all, we know of the Wendover Bog people who seem to be a different kind of people that seem more European with fabrics and everything, and they're still trying to cover up the whole thing. I have it on my channel. It was one of my early videos on the revisionist history of the Wendover Bog people. They're still trying to prove it's Native Americans after 30 years or something like that. And supposedly all kinds of books on DNA were written about it, but nothing conclusive. So, because they had this terrible problem of explaining this European DNA at some time period at 7,000 years ago or something like that. So, that's a tough one for them. But also, when they refer to describe these people as being Europeans, again, I think of the Melungians. I don't have a page on it for you to look at, but we'll get into it as we get towards those states. The Melungians as well seem to be a strange indigenous race, apparently, that was here that seemed to have people that have a lot of European features and were different. All the native people said so. And they were from thousands of years ago, too. Their ancestors. So, this also related to my own research. Otherwise, I'm some guy reading articles from you, but I have to relate it to what I know about and what I've done research on, and this one is on Verrazano. One of the first actual descriptions of the East Coast Indian is by Verrazano in the year 1524. Several Indians came aboard his ship at Narragansett Bay, and of them he said, among them were two kings, more beautiful in form and stature than can possibly be described. One was about 40 years old, the other about 24, and they were dressed in the following manner. The oldest had a deerskin around his body, artificially wrought in damask figures. His head was without covering. His hair was tied back in various knots, and around his neck he wore a large chain ornamented with many stones of different colors. Now, here's the really interesting part. Pay attention to this. They exceed us in size, and they are a very fair complexion. Some of them incline more to a white, and others to a tawny color. Their faces... Okay, so you heard what Verrazano's description was of them, and just it brought to mind this video of mine when I was reading this on Duhair's Giant Tribes, because they're saying some sort of similar thing. The ancestors of the Creek Indians were at least a foot taller than the Spanish, so bigger in size is what Verrazano was saying, okay? So overall, see, not just simply taller and skinny like a beanstalk, of considerable size larger and inclining to a white, as Verrazano was required by his manifest to bring back accurate reports. Not like the settlers and the colonists; these were the explorers. This guy had a mission, so that's what had to be done. Accurate reporting on these things. The ancestral Creek men wore mustaches and high leaders wore beards, but the beards were thin like those of the Chinese and Koreans. Nevertheless, Spanish accounts clearly labeled the Duher Caucasians, even though their houses and pottery were apparently similar to those of American Indians. In 1526, Spanish explorer Luis Vasquez de Ayllon landed in modern-day South Carolina. While visiting a province named Duher, he witnessed many unusual things. First, he noted that the peoples of this province were white, not Native American. Second, he noted that the king of Duher, named Data, and his wife were much taller than the commoners and lived in a palace built of stones. So this is very interesting to me because this is how the Watusi people live, okay? They're of extremely large stature, and their subjects are all just people of regular size. See? So this is a similar thing going on in the Americas, curiously. Isn't that curious? Okay, he noted that their hair was brown and hung to the ground. If tall, long-haired Caucasian people living in a stone palace in South Carolina in 1526 isn't unusual enough, the next observation certainly is. Ayllon noted that these people were in possession of some form of pyrotechnic devices, including sparklers and rockets. Ayllon's accounts were recorded by Peter Martyr de Aguilera in his book De Orbe Novo. The reference to sparklers and rockets appears as follows. Okay. Another fraud of the priests is as follows. When the chief is at death's door and about to give up his soul, they send away all witnesses, and then surrounding his bed, they perform some secret jugglery which makes him appear to vomit sparks and ashes. It looks like sparks jumping from a bright fire, or those sulfured papers which people throw into the air to amuse themselves. These sparks rushing through the air and quickly disappearing look like those shooting stars which people call weeping wild goats. The moment the dying man expires, a cloud of those sparks shoots up 3 cubits high with a noise and quickly vanishes. They hail this flame as the dead man's soul, bidding it last farewell, and accompanying its flight with their wailing tears and funeral cries, absolutely convinced that it is taking its flight to heaven. Lamenting and weeping, they escort the body to the tomb. So isn't that interesting that these people seem to have some knowledge of pyrotechnics? And they were larger in size. So again, guys, I did my video on the Hohokam, the survivors who also had strangely shaped skulls and some knowledge beyond that, which they should have had for the time period, like etching, for example. European metal armorers hadn't figured that out for another 400 or 500 years. So, look, are we talking about an ancient, more advanced civilization that disappeared and some knowledge was left over, but not a lot after thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and who knows how many cataclysms in between. 200 years later, in the early 1700s, among the Tuscaroras in nearby North Carolina, another witness to such an event was Baron von Grafenried. His description, recorded in the colonial records of North Carolina, is as follows. After the tomb was covered, I noticed something which passed his imagination, and which I should not believe had I not seen it with my own eyes. From the tomb arose a little flaming fire, like a big candlelight, which went up straight in the air, and noiselessly went straight over the cabin of the deceased widow. and thence further across a big swamp above 1 mile broad, until it finally vanished from sight in the woods. At that sight, I have waited to my surprise and asked what it meant, but the Indians laughed at me as if I ought to have known that this was no rarity among them. They refused, however, to tell me what it was. All that I could ascertain was that they thought a great deal of it, and that this light is a favorable omen which makes them think the deceased a happy soul, but they deem it a most unpropitious sign when a black smoke ascends from the tomb. This flying flame yet could not be artificial on account of the great distance. It could be some physical phenomena like sulphurous vapors, but this great uniformity in its appearance surpasses nature. Saunders, 1886, 1890, I guess. So, and in the colonial records of North Carolina. So anyway, that's just unusual tribe of large people, large hominids down there that seem to be European with mustaches and beards. And again, it makes me think of the Wendover Bog people. It makes me think of the, the Melungeon people. And these other people, like Verrazano, reported them being inclined almost to a white. So, are we talking about a whole different, hybrid of people that we don't know about? And in between hybrid and before them was these much larger people that seem to be inhabiting the earth, these larger hominids and humanoids, which, again, guys, to what the real history is, we can only hardly imagine what it must have been like. Just just take it into fantasy world, and that's why people jump to the alien thing so fast, because it seems so unlikely that it would be homegrown, but it is. See, it's a homegrown story. We just don't know the full story before we even get to aliens. Besides, you know what I think of that. Anyway, but in any case, guys, that was the Carolinas, so there is some stuff going on down there and some histories there in South Carolina. These people certainly, and what they found in North Carolina, these 8-foot and 9-foot skeletons, which is just incredible size, and skulls of unusual size and shape. So we're not talking about, the standard Native Americans, what their ancestors might have been, these other people that just don't seem to get, there's no connection there for some reason, or there's no direct connection. And the Lovelock people in Lovelock Cave were a people where they killed all of them, and the last of them were in a cave where they, suffocated them and he killed them off in these giant genocides. And could these mounds where they find 65 skeletons, should tell you all around the same age or the seen from a battlefield or whatever, is the giant extermination that went on in the Americas, probably roughly at the same time all across the world, because we don't know what the timeline is from one cataclysm to the next. Okay, it could have been 10 civilizations as advanced as ours in the past, for all we know, because that's how much time we're talking about in between. All right, guys, so that's it for the Carolinas. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button kindly, and we'll continue going through all the states that are mentioned in these articles. Just again, it's just so fascinating. The details of some of these things and the histories is just amazing. All right, anyway, Bugcat7 signing out. Peace.